Hi, we want to explore tonight the ideas of reading, inquiry, and transliteracy, really at the heart of a lot of what we do. There are many professional texts about the importance of reading and literacy. Obviously, you can look at the Common Core ELA standards, you can talk to English teachers, but you really, as a school librarian, need to be familiar with some of the key names and the work. So you should definitely know Stephen Krashen and The Power of Reading. Mr. Krashen offers lots of good data and research to back up the importance of free choice and recreational reading. And then Timothy Shanahan, if you're interested in the idea of close reading, which is becoming a really hot topic, you definitely want to look at his blog and what he's writing. In Illinois, we have several Reader's Choice Award programs as a way to promote reading and literacy. And there's a program for each age group. And what happens is each year, teachers, librarians, students can nominate titles to be possibilities on the list. And then a panel of readers decides which books should appear on the list. And then those lists are published in about March for the following school year. And then each of the programs has a slightly different emphasis or slightly different rules about how many books a student needs to read or listen to be able to vote. But it's usually between 3 and 4. And then at the end of February is when the voting happens, and students that are qualified and have read a certain number of books can vote and choose which book and author should win that particular award. So these are great ways to promote reading within the library program. And you can get more information from the ISLAMA website. And it's really kind of fun to run a Reader's Choice program. You can make it as elaborate and as personal as you want. I know that many elementary school folks that do the Monarch, students maybe can't read or vote in that kind of traditional way. So I've seen people have like cutouts of butterflies or whatever they want, and then they have like cans with the pictures of the books, and then students will walk around and kind of place their butterfly in the book that they want to choose. At my school, this is a shot at my school, we set up a voting booth and have an online Google form so students can vote that way. And then you can do all kinds of fun things with the Reader's Choice books. At my school, we run a program called the Battle of the Books, which is kind of like a game show based on students' knowledge of the nominated books for that year. And we have an inter-school competition, and classes challenge each other about their knowledge of the Caudle and Lincoln books. We do a hybrid program at my school for the 8th grade because many 8th graders are required to read some of the books. And because the Caudle runs from 4th through 8th grade, I want to give the students more choices, so we also incorporate some of the Lincoln, which is a high school level book. And then there is a Battle of the Books wiki, where people put up questions for all 4 Reader's Choice Awards. Librarians contribute to this list, and anyone is welcome to use the questions. And we have a Lake County Battle of the Books where we have 5 middle schools that meet together one night a year after school to compete. And it's really fun to get all these students that really like to read from different schools together at this event. And one thing that I would definitely suggest that really helps in terms of building reading and literacy is to tap into the power of the peer. So find lots of ways that students can recommend books to each other, kind of put on display what books they're interested in, and it really has a lot more weight when peers are suggesting books to other peers. And you could do this in a lot of ways, face-to-face. You can have students blog, you can have posters around the room with pictures of students or flashing on TV screens, but you can also use your library catalog to do that, where you could have students tag things or write reviews, and that's a way to kind of show the popularity of different books. And really, as school librarians, we're only limited by our imagination and sometimes our budgets, but the different ways that we can promote reading. So we can really get people involved in, I'm working on a book talking project with classes now where students are going to videotape book talks, and we're going to play them to other classes. During the Olympics last winter, we did a reading Olympics where classes got to compete against each other with the number of pages that they were able to read, and everybody came up with their own kind of logo and mascot, and then we had a big ceremony at the end of the event for the group that read the most pages. And you can think about ways to encourage students to continue to read and to talk about what they're reading through simple things like book clubs. At my school, I run something called the Lunch Bunch Book Club. We have 3 different groups, one for each grade level, and we meet once a month at lunchtime and we eat together and talk about the book that we've read. I think I've mentioned the Guys Read program in class before. You can also even support students that are having their own book clubs, or faculty that want to read young adult books or children's books. There's lots of ways to get people reading together and talking about that. There's even virtual book clubs. You can think about ways you could have discussions online. For an example, there's even a professional club that has a hashtag, and then they have a meeting periodically. Sometimes they'll have the author sit in. There's lots of different ways that you could harness virtual powers too to talk about books. And we're seeing more and more about reading leveling programs, and I know we've talked about this in class, but it's really important for us as school librarians to kind of work to help students maintain their free choice and their independence in what they choose to read. But it's important for us to know about what the leveling programs are that exist and what those levels mean, so that when people come to us with these numbers, we can intelligently and articulately talk about what those numbers mean, what they include, and what they don't. And most of these numbers are formulas based on vocabulary, based on sentence length, and based on novelty of word choice. And generally, none of them take into account any type of content. And we're seeing a lot of new tools and crossover kind of things in literature. One example would be Skeleton Creek. The series has been out for a little while now, but it's this idea that they're interactive books, that there's multimedia components. In Skeleton Creek, students read, or the readers read, a chapter in print, and then there's a secret code and a link, and then they go online to watch a video. And this is kind of a horror series. So they kind of go back and forth in the multimedia mode. So for students that want a video or media, it's a good way to kind of balance the text and the media. You can think about ways to offer varieties of texts, including graphic novels, novels in verse, thinking about ways that audiobooks can complement or supplement your print book collections, thinking about ebooks in different range of formats. So to kind of stay current with what tools are coming out and what genres are available is really critical. Okay, so we talked about promoting literacy and reading a little bit. Now I want to look at the topic of inquiry, because both reading and inquiry play a role into what we're ultimately going to get to, which is transliteracy. So first, some definitions. This is from School of Library and Information Science at Indiana University. So inquiry is the process of formulating questions, organizing ideas, exploring and evaluating information, analyzing and synthesizing data, and communicating findings and conclusions. So it's this process that we go to solve a problem, to find information. And it's something that is really emphasized in school, hopefully. And hopefully when we're creating lifelong learners, they want to be inquisitive and go through the inquiry process. So a fundamental figure in the field that you'd want to know about is Carol Kuthau, if you're not already familiar. She has a theory called ISP, which is the information search process. And her theory is that we go through a cognitive process when we're searching, but there's also an affective component, that we have feelings, thoughts, and actions that correspond with each stage of a search. So not only is it an intellectual process, but it's an emotional one as well. And so here's the picture of her model, and this idea that the actions that we take are kind of the steps that we go through when we're doing research or going through inquiry, that we have this kind of thought process that we go through that starts with kind of this idea of formulating an idea and then figuring out what the idea is and then getting through the process. But that for everybody in her research, she found that there's a series of feelings that we go through as well. And if you think about it, or if you kind of reflect on yourself next time you're doing some research, you might notice that this is true. So you start with some uncertainty when you start a project. You're not quite sure what you're going to choose as your topic. You're not quite sure what kind of information you're looking for. And then you choose a topic or you choose a direction and you feel this optimistic feeling. You feel kind of hopeful, on track, But then as you're kind of overwhelming yourself with information, you get confused and you get frustrated and you start to doubt yourself. But then you get more into the process and you just figure out what you're going to do, and you have that moment of clarity where you feel optimistic again. You feel like, oh, I know where I'm going. I've got that sense of direction. And then you get to the point where you create something and either you're satisfied or disappointed with it, and then you assess how you did. And hopefully you feel a sense of accomplishment and not discouragement with how you did. And so she did this study on students, on adults, virtual, print kind of projects, and the same pattern held time and time again. And so next time you do a research project, kind of in the back of your mind, kind of monitor how you're feeling as you're going through the process, and see if this kind of holds true for you as well. So Eisenberg and Berkowitz, it's kind of apparent when you look at the big six and little three that they took this ISP to heart. And so I know we've talked about this in class, but the big six and little three are research models. There's loads of training materials and resources available at the website. Some is for sale, some is for free. But again, this is just a way to structure the research inquiry process generally for schools. The benefit of using such a model is that it gives you a common vocabulary to use, and that students are being asked to use the same process when they're going through inquiry, so it becomes a habit of mind. And so here's from, an excerpt from the website, so you can kind of see how it's broken down for different age groups. It's made really simple for little ones, and then it gets more and more complex as students get older. And there are loads of inquiry models. I have many school library friends that have homegrown models that they've developed just for their schools to work in their particular contexts. So there's a link here that lists all kinds of models. And one thing to think about is what makes an inquiry model useful for schools? What would make a research framework beneficial for people to adopt and use? And in school libraries, we talk a lot about information literacy, and we have to be careful about throwing that term around too much because people outside the school library don't always care about that terminology, so we kind of have to reframe it at times when we're talking to our colleagues to put it in terms that they are more passionate about and that they understand and care about. But according to the ALA, to be information literate, a person has to be able to recognize when they need information, be able to find it, evaluate it, and use it effectively. And that's pretty much at the heart of what we do when we're doing research. Now there's another group, and this group came out of IMSA, the Illinois Math and Science Academy, and they have a 21st century information fluency model. I gave you this for this week to look at some of their games and online modules. They have fantastic resources and fantastic webinars and professional development, so it's definitely a project to be familiar with because it would be helpful to you. So they talk a lot about digital information fluency. They're really interested in how people are interacting with information online to solve problems. So again, it's the ability to find, evaluate, and use digital information effectively, efficiently, ethically. And their model is kind of circular, and so it's a different way to visualize it, but a lot of the times the concepts are the same and the steps are the same. It's just how it's modeled out. And so information fluency versus information literacy, it might be an issue of terminology. And then there's some people that argue back and forth about being literate versus being fluent. Being literate meaning that you can kind of know how to use a certain language or a system, whereas fluent is you're really comfortable in using that. So I mean, you'll kind of think about what it is which terminology fits best for you, but know that both are being used. And Danny Callison of Indiana University talks about information fluency as the ability to analyze information needs, move confidently among media. So now we're seeing this idea that we're not just talking about print, we're talking about all different kind of media, information and computer literacy skills resulting in the effective application of a strategy or strategies that will best meet those needs. And now we're getting more into this idea of transliteracy. We need to be able to move across formats, platforms, media, to be able to use information. And so AASL is also talking about this as multiple literacies, this idea that we need to be literate in a lot of different ways. And again, ASL talks about the multiple literacies as visual, looking at images, digital, looking at virtual and online information, text, the printed word, and technological. So using, knowing when to use different technology to be able to function in a way that solves problems and in a way that communicates effectively. So transliteracy comes out of the English field, but it's been something that's been embraced by libraries as well, especially university libraries were the kind of first people that kind of embraced this idea of transliteracy. So transliteracy is the ability to read, write, and interact across a range of platforms, tools, and media, from signing and orality through handwriting, print, TV, radio, film, to digital social networks. So this idea is that we need to help our learners become transliterate, so no matter what information environment they're operating in, that they'll be able to figure out what they're doing, evaluate information, and use it in a way that's effective and ethical. So we're not going to do a back channel, obviously, because we're in a virtual environment, but maybe at some point in class we'll be using this to kind of look at how a back channel works and how that kind of makes an in-person experience more transliterate because we can add the virtual layer. Okay. So that was just a quick talk on the idea of literacy, information literacy, and transliteracy, and all kinds of things that we're starting to think